The crystal was a lie. Each of the 1,000 pendants hanging from the ballroom's vaulted ceiling was cut to fracture light, to throw rainbows across the polished marble floor and the curated smiles of the city's medical elite. But for Dr. Alani Reyes, they only seemed to absorb the light, swallowing it into a cold, dense brilliance that offered no warmth. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, felt heavy in her lungs, a pressure that mirrored the one building behind her ribs. She stood near a fluted column, the silk of her emerald gown cool against her skin. The dress was a piece of armor she had chosen with care, its lines architecturally precise, its color a defiant jewel tone in a sea of muted charcoals and navy blues. It was the kind of dress a woman wore when she was celebrating a triumph. It was not the kind of dress a woman wore when she was planning her escape. Alani traced the rim of her untouched champagne flute. The tiny bubbles rose and vanished, each one a silent scream. She was an expert in silence. She had spent the last 5 years cultivating it, turning her home into a museum of quiet endurance. The kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles like dust over every surface, a fine gray powder of things unsaid, of protests swallowed, of pain borne without witness. "You look like a queen, Alani," a warm voice said, cutting through her reverie. Dr. Lena Petrova appeared at her side, her own dress a cheerful, unapologetic splash of crimson. Lena's smile was genuine, a stark contrast to the practiced expressions that filled the room. "Are you even breathing? You're holding yourself so still you might turn to marble." Alani managed a small smile. It was a tired, fragile thing. "Just taking it all in. It's a lot." "It's a circus," Lena corrected, waving a dismissive hand. "A bunch of peacocks trying to impress the grant committees. But your work? Your work is the only real thing in this room tonight. That neuroregenerative compound? It's not just a breakthrough, it's a miracle. You should be on that stage, not hiding behind a pillar." Alani's stomach clenched. The work was hers. The sleepless nights, the failed hypotheses, the painstaking recalibrations, the final shuddering moment of discovery when the data finally bloomed on the screen. It was all hers. But her name was not the one in the program. Her name was not the one that would be called. The honor, like everything else, would go to her husband. "Marcus is the face of the project," Alani said, her voice a carefully constructed monotone. "He's better at this part of it." Lena's eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed. "He's the face because he put himself there. He's good at marketing, I'll give him that. He marketed you, your brain, and your research right onto his own letterhead." She did not want to have this conversation. Not here. Not tonight. Tonight was about survival. She had a bag packed in the trunk of her car, a small apartment leased under her maiden name, a burner phone in her clutch. The finality of it was a terrifying, exhilarating weight. After tonight, the silence would be broken. It would be replaced by shouting and threats and legal papers, but it would be a noise of her own making. As if summoned by the thought, a shift occurred in the room's subtle currents. Conversations paused and then resumed at a slightly higher pitch. A path cleared through the crowd. Marcus Thorne was making his entrance. He moved with a practiced, easy swagger, his tuxedo tailored to emphasize the athletic build he spent hours maintaining. He smiled, a flash of brilliant white, and clapped a fellow executive on the shoulder, his laughter booming. He was a performance, a carefully curated illusion of power and affable charm. Alani had once mistaken that performance for confidence. Now, she saw it for what it was, a desperate, hollow shell. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on her, his smile tightened. It was no longer for the crowd. This smile was just for her, a smile of ownership. He began to walk towards her, and with every step, the air in Alani's lungs grew thinner. The pressure behind her ribs became a physical ache. Lena felt the change in her friend's posture. "Breathe, Alani," she whispered, her hand finding the small of Alani's back. "He can't do anything here." But he could. His power wasn't in public brawls. It was in the subtle, cutting remark, the proprietary hand on her arm, the look that promised retribution later, in the suffocating silence of their home. "There you are," Marcus said, his voice a low purr that was meant to sound intimate but felt like a threat. He did not acknowledge Lena. In his world, secondary characters did not get speaking lines. "I was looking for you. People are asking where the brilliant doctor's beautiful wife is." He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate, a fiction he had authored and forced her to inhabit. "I'm here, Marcus," she said, her voice steady. His gaze swept over her dress, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He preferred her in muted tones, in colors that made her fade into the background. This emerald was a declaration, and he had not approved it. "You should have waited for me," he said, his fingers closing around her upper arm. His grip was just a little too tight, a precise calibration of possession that was invisible to onlookers, but a clear signal to her. "Let go of my arm, Marcus," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was not a request. He laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Don't be dramatic. We need to go and talk to the board from Daishim Group. Their funding is up for renewal, and they need to see a united front." The Daishim Group, the faceless Korean conglomerate that had been the silent primary benefactor of her research for the past 3 years. Their money was famously patient, their oversight minimal. They only cared about results, and she had delivered them. "You can talk to them," Alani said, trying to pull her arm away. His grip tightened, the pressure of his fingers a dull, insistent pain. "My presence isn't required." "Your presence is always required," he hissed, his smile unwavering for the benefit of the room, but his eyes were cold stones. "You are my wife. You have an obligation. Stop making a scene." She was the one making a scene, not him with his hand bruising her arm in the middle of a gala. The absurdity of it was so profound, it almost made her want to laugh. The sound that escaped her, however, was a sharp intake of breath as his fingers dug deeper. "Let go!" It was at that moment the universe seemed to hold its breath. The light from the crystal pendants seemed to dim. The hum of 100 conversations did not just quiet. It ceased. It was not a gradual fading. It was a sudden, surgical excision of sound, as if a switch had been flipped somewhere. The silence that fell was different from the one in her home. This was not the silence of endurance. This was the silence of consequence. It was a heavy, weighted silence, the kind that precedes a storm or follows a king's decree. Alani, caught in her own small vortex of pain and defiance, was the last to notice. She saw it first in Marcus's eyes. His smug confidence faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then annoyance, as he registered the sudden quiet. He looked up, his jaw tightening, ready to challenge whoever had dared to steal his spotlight. And then he froze. Following his gaze, Alani looked past his shoulder. Standing not 10 feet away was a man. He was not large or physically imposing, but the space he occupied seemed to have expanded, pushing the air and the noise away from him. He was dressed in a charcoal suit so exquisitely tailored it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin. His hands were relaxed at his sides. His posture was one of absolute stillness. He was not performing. He did not rush. He was not there to make a grand entrance. He was simply there. And his presence had bent the reality of the room around him. Alani had never seen him before, yet she felt a disorienting sense of recognition. It was his eyes. They were dark and profoundly calm, and they were fixed not on Marcus, but on her. He was not looking at her dress or her face, but into her with an unnerving, assessing stillness. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the tremor in her hand, the carefully constructed facade, and the terrified woman beneath it. He saw everything. The man was Jinwoo Kwon, the chairman of the Daishim Group, the architect of the patient money that had funded her miracle. Jinwoo's gaze shifted, moving from Alani's eyes down to Marcus's hand, still clamped on her arm. The shift was infinitesimal, but it was like the sun passing behind the moon. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he spoke, his voice was a low, resonant baritone, steady as iron wrapped in silk. It cut through the absolute silence with the precision of a scalpel. "Take your hand off her." It was not a request. It was not a command. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of an event that had already, in his mind, come to pass. Marcus, disoriented and thrown off balance by the sudden shift in power, reacted with blustering arrogance. "I beg your pardon? This is a private conversation with my wife." He emphasized the word wife, turning it into a shield, a claim of ownership. Jinwoo Kwon took one slow, deliberate step forward. He did not look at Marcus's face. His eyes remained on the point of contact, the offending hand on Alani's arm. "I am not in the habit of repeating myself." 2 men in identical dark suits materialized behind Jinwoo, their movements fluid and silent. They had not been there a second ago, and yet they were. They stood with the same preternatural stillness as their boss, their presence a silent, lethal promise. The crowd, which had been frozen in place, seemed to collectively shrink back, creating an even wider circle of empty marble around the 4 of them. Lena, her face pale, took a half step forward, then stopped, clearly understanding that this was a drama far beyond her influence. Marcus finally let go. His hand dropped from Alani's arm as if it had been burned. A wave of relief so profound washed over her that her knees felt weak. She did not stumble. Years of holding herself together under pressure served her now, keeping her spine straight, her head held high. On her skin, the imprints of his fingers were already beginning to blossom into a faint, angry red. "Mr. Kwon," Marcus stammered, his performative charm curdling into obsequious panic. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. My wife, she's a little overwrought tonight. The pressure of the event." Jinwoo's gaze finally lifted to meet Marcus's. There was no anger in his eyes. There was no emotion at all. It was a flat, dismissive emptiness, the look one might give an insect before crushing it. It was 1,000 times more terrifying than rage. "You are mistaken," Jinwoo said, his voice still unnervingly calm. "You are the one who is overwrought, and you are no longer welcome at this event." He gave a nearly imperceptible nod to the men behind him. "Mr. Choi, please escort Mr. Thorne outside." "Of course, Chairman," one of the men said, his voice as devoid of inflection as his employer's. He and his partner moved, not with the brusque force of bouncers, but with an eerie, frictionless efficiency. They did not grab Marcus. They simply flanked him, their proximity an undeniable cage. "Now, wait a minute!" Marcus sputtered, his face flushing with fury and humiliation. "You can't do this! I am the keynote speaker! I have a contract!" "The Foundation has certain standards regarding the conduct of its honorees," Jinwoo stated, his attention already shifting back to Alani, as if Marcus had ceased to exist. "You no longer meet them." "This is because of her," Marcus snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Alani. "She's been poisoning you against me. She is manipulative and—" Mr. Choi placed a hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. The effect was instantaneous. Marcus's tirade cut off with a choked gasp, his body going rigid. The quiet, professional pressure of that hand seemed to rob him of all his bluster. "I believe the chairman was clear," Mr. Choi said softly. "You are leaving." They guided him away. Marcus did not fight. He stumbled along between them, his face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, their whispers following in his wake. In less than 30 seconds, he was gone. The sound of his frantic, fading protests was swallowed by the grand hallway. The silence he left behind was profound. Then, Jinwoo Kwon turned his full attention back to Alani. The entire room, filled with 100 powerful people, seemed to vanish. There was only him, the quiet hum of the air conditioning, and the faint, throbbing ache in her arm. "Dr. Reyes," he said, and the sound of her own name, her real name, was a balm. "Are you all right?" She looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time. He was younger than she'd imagined, perhaps in his late 30s. His features were sharp and elegant, his black hair impeccably styled. But it was the stillness that defined him. He was the calm eye of a hurricane he had created. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice a little shaky. "Thank you." He gave a slight formal bow of his head. His gaze dropped again, this time to her wrist, where the cuff of her emerald gown had ridden up slightly. Peeking out from beneath the silk was a thin, silvery line against her skin. It was an old scar, pale with age, from a laboratory accident years ago. A shattered beaker of volatile acid. Marcus had been in the lab that day, impatient and distracting, and in the split second her attention had been diverted, the glass had slipped. He'd called her clumsy. He'd been annoyed that her injury delayed his lunch. Jinwoo's eyes lingered on the scar for only a second, but his expression shifted. The cool, assessing calm was momentarily replaced by something else. A flicker of recognition, a shadow of something harder, colder, and far more personal than his dismissal of Marcus had been. It was there and gone in an instant, but Alani saw it. "The air in here has become stale," he said, his voice returning to its placid neutrality. "Please, walk with me." It was not a question, but for the first time in a very long time, Alani found she did not mind. She gave a small nod. He offered her his arm. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, the memory of Marcus's grip still fresh. But his arm was offered with the palm up, an invitation, not a demand. His hand was open, relaxed. She placed her hand on his arm. The fabric of his suit was smooth and cool. Beneath it, his arm was like granite. He did not move immediately. He waited until she felt steady, until her breathing had evened out. Then he began to walk, leading her away from the gaping crowd, away from the 1,000 dead crystals, and toward a set of double doors that led to a private garden. As they walked, a quiet word was murmured to Mr. Choi, who had reappeared as silently as he had vanished. "Have my car brought to the east gate. We are leaving." The garden was a sanctuary of sculpted boxwood and white roses, their scent a clean, pure counterpoint to the cloying lilies inside. The city's noise was a distant hum, muted by stone walls and manicured hedges. A fountain murmured in the center, the sound of its water a gentle absolution. Alani took a deep, shuddering breath of the cool night air. It was the first real breath she had taken all evening. Jinwoo led her to a stone bench near the fountain, the marble cool through the thin silk of her gown. He did not sit immediately beside her, but stood a respectful distance away, his hands clasped behind his back. He was giving her space, a commodity she hadn't realized she was so starved for. "I apologize for the public nature of that confrontation, Dr. Reyes," he said. "It was not my intention to cause you further distress." "You have nothing to apologize for," she replied, her voice stronger now. She looked at her arm, where faint red marks were still visible. "You intervened. He should not have put you in a position that required intervention," Jinwoo stated simply. It was a sentence of condemnation, delivered with the flat finality of a judge's gavel. They fell into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft splash of the fountain. He was not pressing her for details. He was not asking if she was leaving Marcus or what had happened before. He seemed to have assessed the entire situation in that one loaded glance in the ballroom and found no further questions necessary. This lack of prying was a strange and profound kindness. Marcus would have demanded a full accounting, a detailed report on her feelings, her intentions, all for the purpose of using it against her. Jinwoo simply waited. "The scar on your wrist," he said finally, his voice soft. "It is from the L compound synthesis, is it not? The second trial. A cracked beaker during the final titration." Alani stared at him, stunned into silence. The details were so specific, so precise. That incident had never been in any official report. It was a minor event, documented only in her personal lab notes, a footnote in the long history of the project. Marcus had certainly never remembered the details. How could you possibly know that? She asked. He turned to look at her, and for the first time, the calm mask of the chairman slipped, allowing a hint of something more personal to show through. Because I have read every page of your personal lab notes, Dr. Reyes, every progress report, every scribbled annotation in the margins. I did not fund Marcus Thorne. I funded you. The confession landed in the quiet garden with the force of a physical blow. Alani felt a wave of dizziness. The Daisham group, this powerful, unknowable entity, was not a faceless backer. It was him. And he had not been watching the project. He had been watching her. You are the architect of the Phoenix Initiative, he continued, using her private name for the project. Thorne was merely the frame you were forced to put around your masterpiece. An unstable, poorly constructed frame, it would seem. She thought about the years of work, the moments of despair, the flashes of brilliance. She had shared them with no one. Marcus had only been interested in the final, profitable results. To know that someone had been a silent witness to the entire journey, to the struggle and the science, was deeply, terrifyingly intimate. Why? She whispered. Why not just approach me directly? Your husband made it very clear that all communications were to go through him. He positioned himself as the gatekeeper to your genius, Jinwoo said, a sliver of ice entering his tone. I am a patient man. I prefer to observe the full dynamics of a system before I interact with it. I have found it illuminating. He had been watching. He had seen the way Marcus took credit, the way he presented her data as his own, the subtle dismissals in board meetings. He had seen it all and said nothing. A flicker of resentment sparked within her. So you watched him erase me and did nothing? No. He corrected, his voice gentle but firm. I watched you refuse to be erased. I watched you continue to produce brilliant work despite the obstacles. I was gathering data. My intervention had to be decisive, and it had to be permanent. Tonight, Mr. Thorne provided the necessary catalyst. His corporate, detached language was jarring, yet it made a strange kind of sense. He had not seen a domestic dispute. He had seen a systemic failure, a flawed component, Marcus, that was threatening a critical asset, her, and he had moved to correct it. A black sedan, so polished it seemed to drink the moonlight, pulled up silently to the east gate at the far end of the garden. Mr. Choi stood by the open rear door. You are not safe here, Dr. Reyes, Jinwoo said, his tone shifting back to one of quiet command. And you cannot go home. Your husband is a man of predictable escalations. He will not react to this humiliation with grace. Alani thought of her packed bag in her car, the keys to the small anonymous apartment, her plan. It seemed so fragile now, so inadequate. A flimsy shield against the hurricane of Marcus's rage. I have a place to go, she said, a reflexive defense of her own carefully laid preparations. A small apartment leased a month ago under your mother's maiden name, Jinwoo stated. Alani's blood ran cold. He will find it within a day. His resources are not insignificant when it comes to tracking you. You are, in his mind, his most valuable possession. He knew. He knew everything. The depth of his surveillance was breathtaking, a violation of her privacy that should have terrified her. But strangely, under the weight of her exhaustion and the fresh terror of Marcus's public unmasking, it felt less like a violation and more like a safety net she hadn't known was there. I am offering you a different solution, he said. Sanctuary, complete and total safety, legal resources, and, when you are ready, a laboratory of your own, with no frames and no gatekeepers. All I ask in return is that you allow me to handle the problem of Marcus Thorne. He extended his hand. It was the same open, steady gesture as before. An invitation. I don't leave because things become complicated, Alani said, the words coming out stronger than she felt. It was important he understood that. I leave because they are untenable. I know, he said, his gaze unwavering. That is why I am here. She looked from his outstretched hand to the waiting car, then back to his calm, patient eyes. Her own plan was a gamble, a desperate leap into the unknown. His offer was a certainty, a fortress. But entering that fortress meant ceding a measure of control she had just fought so hard to reclaim. The exhaustion won. The bone-deep weariness of fighting alone for so long finally overwhelmed her pride. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, his grip warm and firm and profoundly safe. The apartment was less a home and more a statement. It occupied the entire top floor of a sleek obsidian tower that pierced the city skyline. The windows were vast panes of glass, offering a god's-eye view of the sprawling metropolis below. The furniture was minimalist and exquisite. The art on the walls was museum quality, and the silence was absolute. It was the kind of silence that doesn't settle, the kind that is engineered. For the first 2 days, Alani did little more than exist within it. She slept in a bed with linens so soft they felt like mist. She showered in a bathroom carved from a single piece of gray marble. She sat on a white leather sofa and watched the city lights blink to life as dusk fell. Mr. Choi had arranged for her car to be retrieved, her packed bag delivered. Her old life was contained in a single suitcase sitting in the corner of a cavernous walk-in closet. She was safe. The knowledge was a physical presence, a loosening of a knot in her chest she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. But safety felt disorienting, like walking on solid ground after years at sea. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, but it was tangled with a sharp, defensive prickle of unease. She had traded one cage for another, albeit a gilded and infinitely more comfortable one. She had gone from being Marcus's possession to Jinwoo's protected asset. On the 3rd morning, she woke with a renewed sense of purpose. She would not be a fragile doll, kept safe on a high shelf. She dressed not in the soft loungewear left for her, but in a pair of her own tailored trousers and a silk blouse. When Mr. Choi arrived with a tray of breakfast, a simple, elegant Korean meal, she was waiting for him, her spine straight. "Good morning, Mr. Choi," she said. "I would like to see Mr. Kwan." Mr. Choi, ever placid, gave a slight bow. "The chairman is in a meeting, doctor. He will be available this afternoon." "I would also like my laptop and my research notes," she added. "The complete archive." "That has already been arranged," he replied, gesturing to a sleek silver briefcase on the console table by the door. "We took the liberty of retrieving the contents of your office safe. A full encrypted backup of your primary and secondary servers is also contained on the solid-state drive within." She stared at the briefcase. Her life's work. Marcus had changed the code to the safe 2 months ago, a petty assertion of control. She had been meaning to find a way to get into it. It seemed Jinwoo had simply taken it. The efficiency was as breathtaking as it was alarming. "How?" she asked. "The building's security chief is an old friend," Mr. Choi said with no more inflection than if he were commenting on the weather. "The chairman has certain standards regarding data integrity." Later that day, Jinwoo arrived. He wore a dark blue suit that made the charcoal one from the gala seem informal. He moved into the vast apartment with the quiet authority of a man who was utterly at home in any space he chose to occupy. He found her on the enclosed winter terrace, her laptop open, scrolling through her own data, reassuring herself it was all there. "Mr. Choi informed me you wished to see me," he said, remaining in the doorway. "I am grateful for your protection, Mr. Kwan," she began, turning to face him, "but I cannot simply be kept here. I am not a piece of art for your collection." A flicker of something, amusement, respect, danced in his dark eyes. "I have never considered you to be one, Dr. Reyes. I consider you to be the most capable person in every room you have ever been in. My only intention was to provide you with a secure environment while the external threats were being neutralized." "The external threats being my husband," she stated. "Among other things," he said. He walked over to the window, looking down at the city. This morning, the board of Ethelred Pharmaceuticals voted to accept a rather generous acquisition offer from a previously unknown holding company. As of 10 a.m. this morning, I own them. All of their assets, their research divisions, their patents, and their debts. Alani felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Ethelred was Marcus's company, a mid-level but respected player in the industry. To acquire a company like that took weeks, months of due diligence and negotiation. "You bought his company?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I bought his platform," Jin Woo corrected, still looking out the window. "A man like Marcus Thorne is nothing without his platform. His title, his expense account, his ability to take credit for the work of others. I have removed it. Mostly." "Mostly?" He turned to face her. "He has filed a lawsuit. He is suing you for intellectual property theft. He claims the entire Phoenix Initiative is his work, and that you stole it." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it stole her breath. He was suing her for stealing her own life's work, the work he had stolen from her. It was a move of such narcissistic delusion that it was almost artful. But she did not feel fear. She felt a cold, clarifying anger. "He will not win," she said. "No, he will not," Jinwoo agreed. "But he believes he can. He believes you are isolated and terrified. He believes that I am a temporary distraction and that you will eventually, as he told his lawyer, come to your senses and beg to come back. He is operating from a position of profound ignorance. This is his fatal miscalculation." A slow, quiet dance began between them in the days that followed. It was a relationship built in the spaces between words. He would join her for dinner in the penthouse, and they would not speak of Marcus. Instead, they would speak of cellular decay and protein folding. She would show him a line of code or a data model, and he would listen with an unnerving, focused intelligence, asking questions that were not the polite inquiries of a layman, but the sharp, insightful probes of a fellow strategist. He learned that her favorite tea was a rare single estate oolong, and a case of it appeared the next day. She learned that he never took sugar or milk in his coffee, and that he had a younger sister who was a concert violinist in Seoul. He was a man made of quiet rituals and immense hidden depths. He moved with unhurried precision through a world that seemed to bend to his will. She began to feel less like a protected asset and more like a partner. He would ask her opinion on the structuring of the new research division he was creating, the one she would eventually lead. He showed her blueprints for a state-of-the-art laboratory being fast-tracked for construction. He did not treat her like a victim he had rescued. He treated her like an expert he had recruited. One evening, they were standing on the terrace, the city a glittering tapestry below them. "The Obsidian Gala is next week," he said. "It is the premier event of the financial quarter. Everyone will be there." Alani tensed. "I am not ready for another gala." "I am not asking you to be," he said, his voice gentle. "But Marcus will be there. He has procured a ticket through a third party. He intends to confront you, to make a public appeal, to humiliate you into submission." "Then I won't go," she said simply. "That is an option," Jinwoo conceded. "But it is a defensive posture. It allows him to think he has treed you. It feeds his delusion that he still has some measure of control. I am proposing an alternative, a final, public resolution." He turned to her, his expression serious. "He believes he is walking into a room where you are a guest. I want him to walk into a room where you are the host. I want him to face you not when you are hiding behind me, but when you are standing beside me, as my equal." The offer hung in the air between them. It was a risk, a terrifying public gamble. But the thought of hiding, of letting Marcus think he had won even a small victory, was more than she could bear. She had spent years fading into the background. The emerald dress had been the first step out of the shadows. This was the next. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. A slow smile touched Jinwoo's lips. It transformed his face, erasing the cool distance of the chairman and revealing the man beneath. "Only one thing, Dr. Reyes," he said. I need you to choose your own dress this time. Marcus Thorne was a man running on the fumes of his own arrogance. His world had been dismantled with a speed and silent brutality that he still couldn't fully process. His keycards had stopped working, his corporate accounts were frozen, his name had been scraped from the company website, replaced by a single chilling line, "Under new management." His calls to board members, men he had golfed with, whose children's birthdays he knew, went unreturned. He had been surgically and completely excised from the life he had built, but his ego was a fortress. In his mind, this was all a grand theatrical negotiating tactic by the mysterious new owner. A power play, and Alani was at the center of it. She had run to this man, this Quan, and filled his head with lies. But Marcus knew her. He knew the frightened, pliable woman beneath the recent baffling displays of defiance. She was weak. She would break. "Give her 3 days," he'd snarled at his increasingly nervous lawyer. "She'll be begging to come back. She can't survive without me." 3 days had become a week. The week had become 2. His accounts were dwindling. The lawsuit, his masterstroke, had been met with a deafening silence from the other side. No frantic calls to settle, no counteroffers, nothing. It was like shouting into a vacuum. His desperation curdled into a singular, obsessive focus. The Obsidian Gala. It was the center of the financial universe, a place where deals were made and power was displayed. Quan would be there, and he would have Alani with him like a prize, a trophy. Marcus secured a ticket through a contact, paying an exorbitant price that made his stomach churn. It didn't matter. He would confront them. He would expose Alani as a thief and a traitor. He would appeal to her, publicly, to come home. The humiliation would shatter her resolve. He would reclaim his wife, and in doing so, he would reclaim his life. He was sure of it. He had not considered any other outcome. The Obsidian Gala was held in the grand atrium of the new Daisham Tower, the very building where Alani had been living. The space was a cathedral of modern capitalism, all black marble, soaring glass walls, and brushed steel. An orchestra played softly from a mezzanine, the music a subtle, expensive hum beneath the murmur of the global 1%. Alani arrived with Jin Woo. She did not enter on his arm this time. They walked in side by side. She wore a gown the color of molten silver. It was a fluid, shimmering column of fabric that seemed to move with a life of its own, catching the light and throwing it back, not in fractured rainbows, but in a solid, confident gleam. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck. Her only jewelry was a pair of simple diamond earrings. She looked calm, regal, and utterly untouchable. She felt the gazes of 100 powerful people fall upon her, and for the first time, she did not shrink from them. She met them. Jin Woo, in a classic black tuxedo, was a pillar of quiet gravity beside her. He guided her through the room, not with a hand on her back, but with his mere presence, a subtle inclination of his head, a quiet word. He introduced her not as his companion, but as Dr. Alani Reyes. He didn't add a title or an explanation. He said her name as if it should be known, as if it carried its own weight. And in that room, because he was the one saying it, it did. They were speaking with a Japanese tech mogul when Alani felt the familiar shift in the atmosphere, a disturbance in the force. A ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd near the entrance. Marcus had arrived. He looked frayed. His tuxedo was impeccable, but his hair was slightly askew. There was a desperate, hunted look in his eyes that he tried to conceal with a brittle, arrogant smile. He scanned the room with a frantic energy, and his eyes locked on Alani. A spasm of triumph, mingled with fury, crossed his face. He started toward them, shouldering his way through the crowd with a rudeness that drew irritated glances. The Japanese mogul and his wife, sensing the impending confrontation, excused themselves with practiced diplomatic grace. Jin Woo did not turn. He remained facing Alani, his back to Marcus's approach. "He seems warm," Jin Woo observed, his voice a low murmur only she could hear. A tiny, genuine smile touched Alani's lips. He's about to overheat. Alani, Marcus's voice was loud, abrasive, tearing through the sophisticated ambiance of the gala. Several conversations faltered. There you are. I've been looking for you. Alani turned slowly to face him. She did not speak. She simply looked at him, her expression calm, her posture relaxed. The woman who would have flinched, who would have tried to placate him, was gone. He was staring at a stranger. This has gone on long enough, he said, taking another step closer. This vacation of yours is over. It's time to come home. We have things to discuss. We have nothing to discuss, Marcus, she said, her voice clear and steady. It carried easily in the growing quiet. He flinched as if she'd slapped him. Don't take that tone with me. You have an obligation to me, to our marriage. You signed papers. You owe me. His voice was rising, cracking with strain. He was losing control. The only thing I ever owed you was the truth, Alani replied, her voice cooling. And the truth is that my work is my own. The Phoenix Initiative is mine. You will not attach your name to it ever again. Marcus let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. Your work? I funded you. I mentored you. You were a junior researcher with potential before I made you. Everything you have is because of me. He gestured wildly at the opulent room. You think you belong here? You're nothing without me. He lunged forward, his hand reaching for her arm, a reflexive, desperate grasp for control. He never made it. Jinwoo moved. It was not a fast movement, but it was one of absolute final precision. He stepped between them, his body shielding Alani. He did not touch Marcus. He simply occupied the space. That is far enough, Mr. Thorne, Jinwoo said. His voice was not loud, but it silenced the entire atrium. The orchestra faltered and went quiet. Every single person in the room was now watching. This was the moment. The trap had been sprung. You! Marcus spat, his face contorted with hate. Stay out of this. This is between me and my wife. She is not your wife, Jinwoo stated, his voice dropping to a dangerously soft level. The divorce papers were filed this morning. The petition cited, among other things, professional sabotage and financial abuse. Given my recent acquisition of your bank's parent company, I was able to provide your wife's legal team with some very thorough documentation of your spending habits. Marcus paled. You have no right. I have every right, Jinwoo interrupted, his calm beginning to feel like a physical weight in the room. I have the right of ownership. You see, you've been working under a slight misapprehension, Mr. Thorne. You seem to believe that you have assets, that you have power, that you have a lawsuit. Jinwoo raised his hand, and Mr. Choi, who had been standing impassively by a nearby column, stepped forward and handed him a slim tablet. Jinwoo angled the screen so Marcus could see it. You sued for intellectual property theft, Jinwoo continued, his voice a quiet monologue of destruction. A bold move. Unfortunately, the company that holds the patents for the Phoenix Initiative, Ethelred Pharmaceuticals, filed a motion to dismiss your case this afternoon. They filed it with prejudice. They can't, Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with horror as he stared at the legal document on the screen. I was their CEO. You were, Jinwoo agreed. But the new ownership felt your lawsuit was frivolous and damaging to the company's core assets. The new ownership, of course, is me. He swiped the screen. A new document appeared. This is the deed to your penthouse apartment, or rather, it was. The shell corporation that held the title defaulted on a rather substantial balloon payment yesterday. A pity. I was able to acquire it this morning for a very reasonable price. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Swipe. Your portfolio of stocks and bonds, managed by a firm I have had a controlling interest in for 6 years. On my advice, your portfolio manager leveraged your positions quite aggressively last week. The market, regrettably, turned. Your portfolio was wiped out. In fact, you now owe the firm a considerable sum. They will be in touch. Swipe, swipe, swipe. With each motion of his finger, another pillar of Marcus's life turned to dust on the screen. His car lease, his club memberships, his lines of credit. Each one was a thread that Jin Woo had quietly taken hold of, and now, all at once, he pulled them. "You have nothing, Mr. Thorne," Jin Woo concluded, the tablet going dark. He looked at the man before him, a man who had seemed so powerful just weeks ago, a man who had terrorized Alani for years. Now he was just a shell, a hollow man in a rented tuxedo. "You are not a member of this club. You are not an honored guest. You are not a CEO. You are not even a husband. You are a trespasser. And you are in my house." Marcus stared at him, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. His face, which had been flushed with rage, was now a waxy, bloodless white. His entire world, the entire edifice of his identity, had been demolished in less than 2 minutes. The arrogance that had fueled him for so long sputtered and died, leaving a vacuum. And into that vacuum rushed the terrifying, crushing reality of his utter ruin. His knees gave out. He dropped to the floor of the grand atrium, a boneless, shuddering heap. A sound tore from his throat, a raw animal sob of pure despair. He knelt there, on the polished black marble, amidst the silent, staring titans of industry, and he wept. He begged. "Please," he choked out, his words dissolving into incoherent sobs. "No. Please. Don't." He was not begging for his money or his job. He was begging for his reality. But it was already gone. Jinwoo simply watched him, his expression unreadable. He did not gloat. He was not performing. He was a force of nature that had run its course. 2 of the gala's security guards, large men in crisp uniforms, moved forward uncertainly, looking to Jinwoo for guidance. He gave a single, sharp nod. They lifted Marcus to his feet. He did not resist. He was completely broken, his body limp, his sobs echoing in the cavernous, silent room. They dragged him away, a pathetic, ruined man, leaving nothing behind but the faint, lingering scent of his expensive and now worthless cologne. An absolute, stunned silence held the room in its grip. 100 of the world's most powerful people had just witnessed a man's complete and total annihilation, executed with the silent, brutal elegance of a chess master checkmating a child. Then Jinwoo Kwon turned. He did not address the crowd. He addressed Alani. His voice, though quiet, carried to every corner of the silent atrium. "Are you all right?" Alani looked at the space where Marcus had been, then at the shocked faces of the onlookers, and finally at Jin Woo. She felt a slow, profound exhale release from her lungs, a breath she felt she had been holding for 5 years. She was not giddy. She was not triumphant. She felt a vast, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of peace, the sense of a ledger finally being balanced. "Yes," she said, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a real smile reached her eyes. "I am." Jinwoo returned the smile, a small private gesture in the midst of a very public spectacle. He then turned to the silent, watching crowd. His voice regained its formal, chairman's tone, but there was a new warmth woven through it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "allow me to apologize for that unfortunate interruption." He paused, letting the magnitude of the understatement settle. "Many of you tonight were anticipating a keynote address on the future of regenerative medicine from the CEO of Ethelred Pharmaceuticals. As that position is now vacant, a change to the program is in order." He extended a hand, not to touch Alani, but as a gesture of presentation. "I would like to introduce you to the true architect of the Phoenix Initiative. The mind that conceived the L compound, the hands that perfected its synthesis, and the woman who will be leading Daishim Group's new global biotechnology division. This is Dr. Alani Reyes." He said her name, and this time it was not just a name. It was a title. It was a coronation. A wave of polite, then genuinely enthusiastic applause broke the silence, rolling through the atrium. People who had looked through her hours earlier now looked at her with respect, with awe. They were not applauding Jin Woo's power. They were applauding her vindication. She stood there, bathed in the warm light and the sound of her own name being recognized, and felt the last of the shadows fall away. She was not Marcus's wife. She was not Jin Woo's protected asset. She was Dr. Alani Reyes. She was standing in the light, and she was home. Later, long after the last of the guests had departed, after the orchestra had packed up and the cleaning crews had begun their silent work, Alani and Jin Woo stood on the winter terrace of the penthouse. The city glittered below them, a galaxy of captured stars. The silver gown was gone, replaced by a simple, soft cashmere robe. He was still in his tuxedo, though his bow tie was undone and his collar was open. Neither of them had spoken for a long time. They simply shared the quiet, watching the ceaseless flow of traffic on the distant highways, tiny rivers of light. "Is it over?" she asked softly. "The threat he posed to you is over," Jin Woo clarified. "He will never have the power to harm you again. The rest, the noise, the legal formalities, Mr. Choi will handle it. It will not touch you." She nodded, leaning her head against the cool glass of the window. The weight of her past, the constant grinding exhaustion of her life with Marcus, felt like a story she had read about someone else. The relief was so profound it was almost a physical ache. "Thank you," she said. It was an inadequate phrase for what he had done. He had not just saved her. He had restored her. He had taken the masterpiece that Marcus had tried to deface and hide, and he had hung it in the center of the world for all to see. "Gratitude is not necessary between partners, Dr. Reyes," he said. "Alani," she corrected him gently. He turned to face her. "Alani," he repeated, and her name sounded different in his voice, softer. "And you must call me Jin Woo." "Jin Woo," she tried. It felt right. He looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "What I did tonight, the display of power, it was necessary to be absolute, to leave no room for doubt, but I know it can also be intimidating." "It was," she admitted honestly. "It was terrifying, and it was the safest I have ever felt in my entire life." A ghost of his rare smile appeared. "A complicated feeling." "I am beginning to think," Alani said, looking out at the endless city, "that the best things in life are. My work is complicated. My past was complicated. It seems only fitting that my future would be as well." He moved to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The quiet energy that radiated from him was no longer just a promise of safety. It was a promise of stability, of a shared foundation. "I do not want to be another man who controls your life, Alani," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I want to be the man who ensures no one ever can again, including me. The laboratory is yours. The company division is yours. Your name is on the charter. Your authority is final." She looked at him, at this quiet, formidable man who had dismantled her tormentor with the cool precision of a surgeon, and saw not a sovereign, but a sentinel. He was not looking for a possession. He was looking for an equal. "And this place?" she asked, gesturing to the beautiful, silent apartment. "Is it mine too?" "This is my home," he said simply. "I would be honored if you would consider making it yours as well. Not as a guest, not as a tenant, as a partner." The future was not a simple, happily ever after. It was a laboratory waiting for its director. It was a company waiting for its leader. It was a partnership waiting to be built, day by day, on a foundation of mutual respect, quiet understanding, and the shared, profound relief of being seen correctly for the very first time. Alani looked from the city lights back to his steady, patient gaze. She thought of the years of silence, of being underestimated, of enduring, and she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that those years were finally, truly over. "I don't leave because things become complicated," she said, echoing her own words from the garden. She reached out and placed her hand in his. "I stay."